Welcome back to the channel. And man, Cowboys Nation, we finally have a new head coach. And it definitely wasn't the guy I was expecting, but still more of the same old from the Dallas Cowboys. So before we get into the topic, can you do me a favor and like this video, subscribe to the channel so I can keep giving you guys this unfiltered Cowboys content. So if you don't already know, the Dallas Cowboys have hired Brian Schottenheimer, their former OC, as their new head coach. They let Mike McCarthy walk, and the fact that he doesn't have a job up to this point, when the only job I believe available is the Saints job, kind of proves how bad of a coach he really was. But for some reason, everyone kept hyping up Mike McCarthy as if the Cowboys' offense didn't look terrible. The more control he had on the offense going into a season where it was basically all on him, he showed that he couldn't adjust. And for me, I personally think after the Packers game, he was basically gone. But this year really showed me that yes, Mike McCarthy may be a good people person. Yes, he can keep the team together. But at the end of the day, he doesn't give you a competitive advantage. And that for me is what I think really held him back and why they're just like, okay, well, get Shoddy. He can bring more innovation and build on top of what you're doing because offensively, you were holding this team back. So that's where it is. But again, they replaced Mike McCarthy with his OC Shoddy, who didn't call plays, which for me is a very Cowboys thing to do. And I knew things were going to get a little bit weird the minute they both, when both Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn were hired by the teams. And for me, I just basically narrowed down their candidates to either Kellen Moore or Brian Schottenheimer because let's just be real. We all knew that Robert Saleh and Leslie Frazier were just called to satisfy the Rooney Rule. They weren't nobody. They were never going to get hired as a head coach for the Cowboys, but it is what it is. Um, and for me, it wasn't the hiring of Shoddy that was annoying. It was the fact that the Cowboys, aka the Joneses, purposely waited for all the good options to be gone. They didn't interview him, and they just ended up going with their guy in the end. And for me, that's why I say the Cowboys are all about playing games, wasting people's time, the story, attention. Because if you're going to end up hiring Shoddy anyway, then why not just fire Mike McCarthy? Why wait till the end of the season to let him go? You could have fired Mike, promoted Shoddy to play caller or interim head coach, who cares? And you could have really saw what the innovation you could have brought to the offense. But instead, you kept Mike because you're cheap and you didn't want to have to pay him to sit at home. And you just ended up hiring the guy that worked under him. That for me, that just doesn't make sense. But I'm not saying that Shoddy can't coach, but I'm just saying the only reason that he has a job is because the Joneses know that they can, one, control him, two, he's familiar, and three, and most important, he's cheap. And we didn't know if Shoddy could actually call plays. We don't know if he can actually coach a team. And we don't know if the Cowboys are actually invested in making him successful. What we do know is that he will be here for the next 4 years, and they're tying him to the hip of Dak. The Joneses are pushing the narrative that this is a Dak hire. You've seen a lot of sports media and all these Cowboys people. This is the guy that Dak Prescott wanted. Dak wanted Shoddy over Kellen Moore. Even if that's true, we got to remember the Cowboys only gave Dak two head coaching options. So let's not pretend like this is all on Dak. It's a built in excuse for if things go south, they can purge the team of Dak and Shoddy at the same time. The real thing I'm worried about is that is or not is when Jason Witten gets here and is hired, how does that dynamic affect the team? We saw Witten came back to the Cowboys after he left or retired or whatever, and then they made him a starter and used him as if he was the top tight end when he really wasn't. Instead of developing the young guys, let's force stuff to Witten because we like him. You heard the term rollover respect. They did the same thing with Zeke, and we saw how that ended up. Didn't work, hurt the team, lost games because of it. So I fear that bringing in a Witten when there are reports that the Joneses want him to be the next head coach, or they want someone to be the bridge to him being the head coach, that it could disrupt the power structure for Schottenheimer and effectively make Witten a head coach in waiting, and they'll start doing things to sabotage Shoddy and Dak. Because if, for example, Shoddy, who is the head coach, gets overruled by someone like a Jason Witten, or they do something crazy like pay Jason Witten more than Schottenheimer, it could cause a lot of friction. And Shoddy, you can't fire the guy because he's a Jones guy. So you don't want that dynamic messing up the locker room. But again, the Joneses don't care. That's what they do. But that's what I fear the most. That might happen. But hopefully Schottenheimer is smart enough to understand the only way you can keep and maintain your career is to be the best coach with what you have in Dallas. The Cowboys won't go crazy in free agency. They are cheap and they will do the minimum to the bare minimum to make the Cowboys competitive from a player standpoint. So as the head coach, you need to overcome all of that by being a smart football mind that can evaluate talent and can scheme guys open. The Joneses won't help you build a top tier roster. They're going to pay their guys that they like, and then they're going to draft guys. And even though they might not be good, they're going to force you to use them depending on where they're drafted. They say you got to make these guys work. Don't fall for that trap. Do not fall for that trap, or you're going to end up like Mike McCarthy. Figure out how your team is constructed, see who you got, and even if they're not the greatest, like a guy like Turpin isn't the greatest wide receiver, find a way to get him open and you will win games. I promise you. Find a way to get Turpin open and you will win games. That should be your job. Find a way to get that offensive line to block better. Understand your unit and get those guys to play at a level that either exceeds what they're doing or is adjusted based on how they play. That's what you need to do as a coach. Or again, you will end up like Mike McCarthy and you won't survive. Doing the bare minimum and not adjusting based on what you have just because of your ego will have you on the chopping block so much sooner. So for me, the biggest unknown is if Shoddy can outcoach the Joneses' bad decision making. He needs to do that, or it's all over for him and Dak in Dallas. The Cowboys were a good play caller away from being a playoff team under Cooper Rush. I don't care what anyone says. That is the truth. The Cowboys could have easily won the Falcons game, the San Fran game, the second Commanders game, and the Bengals game if Mike McCarthy was a halfway decent play caller. So I'm guessing the decision to hire Schottenheimer was also based on him being more innovative and more willing to incorporate motion, which Mike McCarthy, for some reason, didn't like, which is just weird to me. And he was actually, or Shoddy will actually be dedicated to running the football to set up the pass, which is beneficial for Dak and almost any quarterback. Throwing 40 times a game is stupid and will get you killed as a O line, as a quarterback, especially if your O line's not that good at pass blocking. If Schottenheimer can fix the run scheme and can get back to Dak commanding the offense without throwing a bunch of predictable routes, then I'm all in for Schottenheimer. Uh, but I'm not gonna lie, Mike McCarthy, it's just man, Mike McCarthy doing the bare minimum with no adjustments. If that's who Shoddy ends up being, then it's gonna be a dark 4 years for the Cowboys. Schottenheimer hasn't called plays since 2020, so we don't know what we are getting, Cowboys Nation. We're going to keep covering the Cowboys, and we're going to see how all these things unfold. It could get bad. It could get bad quick, or it could be trending up. We don't know, but we will see. I'm not gonna jump ship, even though at this time it'd be super easy. But I also won't pander for views either. I'll call the Cowboys out on the good, the bad, and the ugly. And when it comes down to it, Cowboys Nation, we just got to stay locked in. I want to thank you guys for watching this video and stay blessed. I'm your boy Mecca Mike, and for all the socials, that's MECCHA Mike, and I'm out.